Hello students, this is Ms. Dyer, and here is your video for makeup from the September 9th live session. The first thing that you see on the screen here is Google Classroom. I'm just using my third period class to show this. And the first thing we'll click on is the September 9th live session. So click on this, and in here, you'll be able to see what we did in class, and you'll also be able to see a set of student slides for day one. Those student slides, if you click on them, will take you through just the title of what we're doing. This unit is called Response to Stimuli. It will look at our learning targets. So today in class, we're going to work on Learning Target 1 and Learning Target 2. Learning Target 1 says, I can describe the levels of structure of a complex organism from the cellular level to the level of the entire organism. Learning Target 2 says, I can identify the basic cause and effect relationship between a stimulus and a response. We will really start with Learning Target 2 when we get into our lesson today, and then we'll move to Learning Target 1 because it makes a little bit more sense that way. It works a little bit more easily. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on interacting structures. And that will allow us to look at a cause and effect relationship and also talk about this, this level of structure from cellular level to the entire organism and how all of this works together to give a cause and effect relationship when we're looking at a stimulus and a response. So we can kind of measure from when we have a stimulus, or we can trace from when we have a stimulus to when we have a response, and we can see what all is involved in that. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to draw some diagrams, and we're going to use the gardener guy and Jake the snake. So these are our characters for the day, and we're going to put this work in our notebook. Part of kind of your exit slip out of class today is a glossary entry. So in your notebooks, you should already have this set up from last Tuesday. If you don't, then you can go back to last Tuesday and you can take a look and see how to set up your notebook. But the basic idea is that you have a notebook of some kind. This is the kind that I like the best. It's just a quad notebook. Works just fine. Okay, and so here's the cover. Inside the cover is the table of contents. You can again see how to set that up on the video for last Tuesday. Here is the glossary. It is on the back of the table of contents. If your ink bleeds through the paper and you only want to write on the fronts of the papers, that's okay. It's not really a big deal, but this is where you'll put your terms that you're going to put into your notebook. If you want to stop and do that now, you can pause the video and do that now, but I would recommend that you do it at the end of class so that you can see what we talk about in class today, and then use these vocabulary words as a little bit of a bridge between what we're doing in class and what you're going to do for your homework. Theoretically, you have done your work for Quizlet, and so you've already seen these vocabulary words. But this is doing a little bit more work with those vocabulary words and helping you to understand how they fit together. So here are your words. You're going to put in the term, you're going to put in the definition, and for right now, you can leave the prove you understand it. You can just leave that open. You don't have to do that right now. So we're putting in the term and the definition. So make yourself a table in your notebook on the glossary page that looks pretty much like this. We will have several more vocabulary words. And this next slide is the same thing. It's just, it's a little bit bigger so you can see it easier. Your homework for today will be to read the attached article and complete the table in the attached Google Doc for each type of sensory receptor, and I'll go over that a little bit more at the end of class. So let's go on over here and let's talk about Jake the snake. And Jake the snake and the gardener guy, this is what your work will look like at the end of class today. But I'm going to draw it on the separate sheet of paper here. This is just your first sheet of paper in your notebook that's past your glossary. So it should probably be your second sheet of paper in your notebook. Okay, so I'm going to label this as interacting structure notes. When you come back in person, or as we have a little bit more time as we go through all of this, I'll show you some maybe better ways to put information in your notebook. But for right now, this works as a title, and we're just going to kind of go with it. So this is the interacting structure notes, and we are featuring Jake the snake and the gardener guy. And so the gardener guy takes his inspiration from real life. He actually takes his inspiration from me. Like, um, I I live in Lexington, but for some reason, I seem to have garter snakes in my backyard. Now, I grew up on a farm where there was the reality of snakes being around at various times. It was in rural Madison County, and just like any farm, every now and then we would run into snakes. But I thought when I moved into Lexington that dealing with snakes would be something that I didn't have to worry about anymore. But that's not quite the case. So I've ended up, I see garter snakes. I've lived in my house for 6 years, so that's 7 summers. And all 7 summers, I have run into garter snakes while I mow, while I weed eat, while I'm working out in the yard. Usually, if I'm just out in the yard, they don't really scare me. I'm kind of used to them. Garter snakes are, they're just kind of healthy for your garden. Little snakes, they eat insects. They're really beneficial for the health of an ecosystem. But when I am weed eating, like along the fence, and I'm really kind of minding my own business, and suddenly this little, maybe foot long or so, green snake slithers out in a hurry, that tends to startle me. So I kind of jump. So my experience with the garter snake um, in my backyard is a little bit of the inspiration for the gardener guy and the gardener guy's interaction with Jake the snake here. Because we can see quite easily how a stimulus, the garter snake, elicits a response or causes a response in the gardener here. So let's go ahead and draw together. We're going to draw our notes. So I'm going to slide this paper just a little bit down here. And I'm going to show you by putting some markers on the page. This is about the area that I'm going to use. So you can see that over here on this side, I have a little bit of space, and over here on this side, I have a little bit of space. And that's because we're going to put some notes on both of those sides of the paper. So I'm going to draw right here in this middle part. So here is our gardener guy. And you can see the amazing artwork. My wonderful artistic talent here. So students say, Miss Dyer, I can't draw. Y'all see what I put on the board here? You're okay. So here is here is the gardener guy. His little nose. He has just seen Jake. So here's Jake. So here's Jake the snake. So our gardener guy has seen Jake the snake. And so we have this kind of startle response. But this response would not have happened if there hadn't been some kind of stimulus, and if that stimulus didn't trigger various messages and signals to go throughout Gardener Guy's body. So let's take a look at the very first thing that has to happen. So the first thing that has to happen is that light from the snake has to get to the gardener guy's eye. So light from the snake has to get to the gardener guy's eye. So I'm going to put that down on my drawing as number 1, and we'll call this received input. So there has to be some kind of input in order for this organism to respond. So here's Jake's eye. Sorry, here's the gardener guy's eye. And so that electromagnetic radiation or light electromagnetic radiation, or you can also just call it light because it's the same thing for our purposes here. The electromagnetic radiation enters the gardener guy's eye through the pupil, and it's going to hit receptors back there. You're going to read about that, and so you're going to find out a little bit more about what happens as the eye takes in this kind of signal or this kind of stimulus in your reading tonight, or your reading that you do later on today. So we'll just start out with something kind of simple here. So we're going to say that the eye sends a signal to the brain. And you'll find out, like I said, a little bit more about that in your reading. So that's the first thing that happens. So let me find a marker. So here is the gardener guy's brain. Kind of drawn that in. So there's going to be a signal sent to the brain. And so the brain is going to decide what to do with that signal or what to say about that signal. So in this case, the gardener guy's brain is signaling that there is either actual danger or there's a potential for danger. But we've got this big idea of danger. So then the brain is going to cause a response. And the way that the brain does that is it's going to prepare the rest of the body for some kind of action. And this is kind of fight or flight. So the brain is preparing the gardener guy to either flee or to fight. So fight or flight response is what we're looking at a little bit here. We're looking at the complexities of that. So we're not just saying, oh, hey, here's a fight or flight response. We're looking at how that response comes about. So the brain sends signals to muscles. Okay. So I'm going to draw, got some signals going from the brain, maybe out to the arms, maybe down to the legs. We're pretty sure that the gardener guy has a heart. Just kidding. The gardener guy has a heart. And so the brain, the heart is a muscle. And so the brain's going to send signals to the heart. And so maybe at the beginning, heartbeats were, kind of normal. But then his heart starts beating really, really fast. So, because he's trying to get, the brain is telling gardener guy's body to get ready to either fight or flee. And so there's got to be oxygen out to these muscles. And so the heart's going to beat faster. Maybe he's going to breathe faster. So he's going to get ready. He's going to have that oxygen available for his muscles in case he decides that he needs to run away. So let's say that this is kind of early on in the gardener guy in his series of interactions with snakes. And so let's say that gardener guy decides, you know what, I'm out of here. Or maybe Jake isn't actually a garter snake. Maybe Jake is a bigger snake. And the gardener guy says, you know what? I think I'm done. And so away goes gardener guy. Okay. So we'll just label that as the gardener guy runs away. Okay. So this is the basic idea of a stimulus and a response. And so we're not talking about a whole lot of the nuts and bolts, but we're talking about a few of them, and we're kind of seeing some of the big stops along the way. What I would like us to do now is to take a few minutes and look at some systems. So we're going to look at some levels of organization. We're going to look at some systems for how this works within the body. So the first thing that we're going to look at, and today or yesterday in class, today as you're watching this, we're going to look at the muscular system. In class on Thursday, we're going to also look at the nervous system. And so then we can talk about how all of that fits together. But for today, we only have time to cover one of those. And so over here to the side, I'm going to write in muscular system. On the right-hand side over here, we'll put in the other part. So we'll put in the nervous system. So what do you think? See if you can remember from last year. What's the smallest level of organization within a system? Hopefully you came up with cell, because that is the smallest part within an overall system within an organism. So we have a cell here, and we'll look at what that muscle cell looks like. So there's our muscle cell. They are called striated cells or striated tissues. And so these are the cells that make up that striated tissue, which I just gave you a hint there. But they are kind of thin on the ends, a little bit wider here in the middle. There's the nucleus. Okay, and so these cells fit together into a tissue. So this is a grouping of one type of cell. So we've got tissue here. And so I'm going to draw a few of these here. And you can see how they fit together nicely. There's a third one. And we'll put in a fourth one. There we go. And then let's go back and put in our nuclei. Each one has a nucleus. So there's our tissue. So this would be muscle tissue. It doesn't quite form anything yet, but when you have a fully formed tissue or a large amount of tissue, that forms something else. See if you can think of what that might be. So a grouping of tissue or a larger functioning entity of tissue, we're going to call that an organ. And so in this case, I'm going to draw a couple of bones. So I'm going to draw a humerus. Here's the humerus. And I'll just call this the radius. The radius or the ulna, one or the other of them. Let's call it the radius. And then out here you would have your wrist bones. And there's a thumb. It's not exactly accurate for a hand, but that works. There's your second finger and third finger and pinky. Okay, so we've got our hand, got a couple of bones in there. So your biceps, that's the muscle right up here on the kind of the front side here. So we're going to put this muscle in. You'll see the larger body of it here. So it inserts at the top and it inserts down here, and then it forms kind of a hinge. And if you look at how you can move your hand, you can touch your biceps and you can see, you can feel and see how that muscle is working. So there's an organ. Okay, then you got an organ system. If we put all of these muscles together, we're going to have an organ system. We'll have the muscular system. And so I'm going to draw our little guy here. This little person is at the gym. Spends quite a bit of time here. Here's his shorts. Here's his shoes. Here are his barbells. And there's a shirt. Put that in. Okay, so throw his shoes in. Okay, so there's the muscular system. And then you end up with an organism. So our last thing is when you put all of those organ systems together, you end up with an organism. And there is our organism at the end. So here is the drawing for today. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Here is your drawing for the day. This is on your second sheet of paper in your notebook. It is titled Interacting Structure Notes, and we're looking at Jake the Snake and Gardener Guy. We'll come back to this on Thursday, so please have this done before class on Thursday. Now, what I would like for you to do next is to go back over to your Google Classroom, and I would like you to go to your homework section that says September 8th and 9th receptors. I think it's labeled differently in some different classes, and so just click on that. But it's the September 8th or 9th homework. So this says to use the census reading, which is attached. So here's your census reading. It's a PDF. Read Write Google will read this to you if you want to use that. To find the types of stimuli, there are 3 total types of stimuli that are picked up by each sense listed in the table. So here is your organizer that looks at the types of senses, the types of stimuli, and the receptors. We'll look at that in just a second more in depth. And you're going to identify what types of receptors are involved. And there's a bonus, so it's optional, how the signal is transmitted to the brain. All of that information is in your reading, and that's all you need to look at for that. So let's look at what the reading or what the organizer looks like. You're going to look at your different senses right here, so smell, taste, sight, hearing, and touch. You're going to identify from your reading what type of stimulus each of these senses takes in. So what type of stimulus would smell recognize? What type of stimulus would taste recognize? Sight is listed as light in your reading. So remember from the notes that is an electromagnetic stimulus. So you're going to go through here and do and find what type of stimulus each of these senses takes in. Then you're also going to go through your reading and find out what type of receptor is responsible for picking up the stimulus so that you have a sense of smell. What type of receptor is responsible for picking up the stimulus that gives you a sense of taste. So this is helpful to you to see how these pathways work. This is a little bit of a long video, but it's got all of the stuff that you need for class. Hopefully this is helpful to you, and I'll see you in class on Thursday.